clients, I know that the farm accountants are pretty good at, depreciation and trying to reduce taxable income on the farm. Maybe with a low personal tax rate, they might actually, rather than trying to minimise tax, they might decide it's actually a bit more profitable to make the farm, show a profit and pay some tax if it's, at a low tax rate. I mean, give you an example. If you look at depreciation on commercial property, nothing's really going to change from a property company. It just means in future they don't get the tax offset of, writing down depreciation. So companies will just have to report more profit in future.
Right.
But that's not a problem if you're paying a lower tax rate.
Any thoughts on that, James?
For the rural sector, I mean, I think there's probably not going to be a lot in this for the rural sector in terms of your personal income taxes, and I think this budget is really about trying to rebalance the New Zealand economy and change a few things around that have been coming about over the last sort of 5 to 10 years or more. We're probably going to see some lower for tax brackets for the higher income earners, encourage them to stay in New Zealand. I think that's a good thing. It'll provide less of an incentive to sort of structure some fairly complex tax structures to get their taxable income down. But when we sort of look at it over the longer term, then I think it's a good thing for the rural sector. We've over a period of time where we're changing the economy around a little bit, and it should be more conducive to lower, more stable for the currency, and we're highly exposed to external factors in terms of our our debt sort of we've got out in the marketplace. So it should be more stable for funding costs, and even we should see a reduction in funding costs. But this is going to be years ahead. It's not going to happen in the short term.
Absolutely, it's a long-term game, isn't it? Now, Jeff, we've already had the R&D announcement from the Prime Minister. Is that extra $234 million of government money really going to allow the productive sector to make any significant headway for the economy, as the government seems to think it will?
I think it'll help. I mean, it'll help providing you don't have an army of bureaucrats trying to administer, how you apply for the scheme. I mean, that's one of the dangers in these schemes. They have good intentions, but, it doesn't filter through to the people who actually need it. So I think it's a plus. I'd sooner see money on R&D than I would on welfare.
Now, Jeff, just moving to the Australian budget now, the government accounts there are seriously in the red. Why is that when the nation's avoided the recession and it's in the middle of an enormous mining boom?
I don't think the numbers are that bad. I mean, what Australia did was they basically gave every taxpayer a refund. So they basically borrowed the money, gave everyone some money to start putting around in the economy, which helped. And then they've brought forward a whole lot of infrastructure spending that they might have done, 5 or 10 years forward.
Like the insulation scheme, which
exactly.
of course is now
and it's
cancelled.
kept the Australian economy out of recession. It's one of the few, if not the only, Western country that avoided a recession. It was
really sort of classic Keynesian stimulatory spending, wasn't it?
That's what it's there for. There's kind of like shock absorbers, and it was time for them to kick in and the government to kick some money in. I mean, even on Kevin Rudd's budget, they're looking at being back in surplus in 2012.
Yeah, well, that's good for us too, of course. If Australia's healthy,
if Australia's healthy, it's good for us.
To benefit too. Now, the Rudd government wants to introduce a 40% super tax on the mining companies that'll bring in an estimated $9 billion a year from the mining industry. That won't have gone down well with the mining lobby, which of course is very powerful in Australia.
Well, true, but I mean, he's not going to lose any votes.
Right.
I mean, taxing wealthy mining companies is actually a vote catcher, and we've got an election later this year. When you actually look at what's proposed in the mining tax, it's actually not that bad. I mean, what happens at the moment is companies pay tax on royalties. And this system has been in place for 20 years. So imagine a situation where gold is $200 an ounce and the royalties are set at $50, so it's 25% tax. What happens now when gold is $1,200 an ounce, but the royalties are still set? So it's based on production, not the value of the assets.
Right.
And what they're trying to do is saying, hey, you guys are actually paying less tax in reality because the value of the product is worth so much more, and you should be paying more tax. This is a non-renewable resource. Once it's gone, it's gone. And so, even some of the mining companies admit that they've got away with a fair bit in the last few years.
Now, Jeff, turning to another budget, so there's going to be an emergency budget in the UK on the 22nd of June. What can we expect from that, do you think?
The mother of all budgets.
Yes.
I mean, the UK has a budget deficit this year of £165 billion.
It's mind-boggling.
It's a mind-boggling number. Even well,
you know, I saw a figure that said that by the end of the year that they could actually be in a worse deficit situation than Greece.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, I know before the election, you know, I think the Lib Dems and the Conservatives were talking about $6 billion worth of, you know, cutting back on government spending. Well, I mean, $6 billion out of 165 isn't going to do a hell of a lot.
No.
So what they're looking at, I mean, they're going to basically have to tax the people that voted for them, middle-income families. So you're going to be looking at a situation where you're going to have to cut back services, cut back spending, and you're going to have to raise taxes. And one of the things that they're looking at is increasing the capital gains tax on second homes, rental properties, shares. You've got about a million rental properties and 250,000 people who have second homes. Most of those tend to be middle-income families, so you know they're going to be squealing. And at the same time, the government's going to start taking back what I call middle-income welfare, which is like working for families, which they probably should never have got in the first place. But again, under a government that was, you know, spending freely, all sorts of things are possible. But a lot of those things will go. I mean, to try and get it back even under 100 billion is going to take a lot of pain. And they have to get it back, you know, to a reasonable number over the next couple of years. Well,
James, with all that pain in the British economy, what's going to be the flow on for us on this side of the world? A drop-off in demand for our products?
Potentially. I mean, there's two factors that will affect us. One being consumption. If people have got to pay higher taxes and you know, they're not going to be growing, then they're not going to probably be wanting to pay, you know, for high value protein products. So that could affect us in terms of the demand for our products, but also probably the biggest being on the currency front. You know, with all this turmoil that we've seen in the UK and in Europe, you know, we've seen our currency strengthen up to sort of 48p, and we're going to continue to see that sort of the pound weak against all currencies, including the New Zealand dollar, for a while, and until they sort out their problems. So as Jeff said, there's some fairly significant problems there, and I can't see that changing anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, they've got a big job to convince the markets that they are a safe haven in the long run. So that's, I don't envy them that job.
Well, otherwise they become, you know, the next Greece.
Yes, exactly. And speaking of which, it's that is still, or the fallout from it is still playing havoc in the marketplace. Stocks are down, and there's still persistent concerns about the state of Europe's economy. So, Jeff, wasn't the 1.2 trillion Kiwi enough to keep the world out of financial chaos?
What it's done is given places like Greece and Spain and Portugal a bit of breathing space. It doesn't solve the long-term problems that they've got. So what it has done, I mean, this week the European Central Bank came out and said that in the last week or 10 days, they've bought about $16.5 billion worth of Greek bonds and probably some Portuguese and Spanish bonds. So that's helped reduce the borrowing costs for places like Greece. I mean, in Germany, if you're borrowing money, say at 10%, you're only paying 3%. In Greece, it was getting up to 6, 7, 8. It got out to 10% that people wanted for the risk. Those rates have come down, so Greece is able to roll over some of its short-term debt at reasonable interest rates, but it doesn't solve their long-term problem. My feeling is they're probably going to have to restructure their debt in 2 or 3 years' time, and most of the bondholders will take a haircut.
Now, just coming back here and investment by overseas entities in New Zealand, a Singapore agricultural company has paid receivers $4.1 million for Craig Norgate's stake in New Zealand Farming Systems Uruguay. That's taken the foreign company, Olam International, to an investment just shy of the 20% holding, which would trigger a takeover. Do you think that's the Singaporeans' plans, Jeff?
I mean, they're a major player when it comes to cotton, cocoa, coffee.
They seem to have
they're top 3 in those. If they decide that dairy products is one of the areas they want to be in, then that's a possibility. And they've already got Brazil, Argentina, and Peru. They've already got stuff in South America. So it's a maybe.
So they know roughly, they've got a feel for the market there. What would be the implications if they did get a controlling share of that Uruguayan?
James is probably better to ask that one.
Do you think, James?
Well, I mean, for us here in New Zealand, it's New Zealand shareholders they're investing overseas. So in terms of our assets and you know, in terms of our dairy industry, not major, I guess. But they would need OIO approval to invest more. They would need takeover approval. So there's a long road ahead before they were able to do that. So it'll be interesting to see what comes of that.
Well, thank you both very much. Interesting stuff. Well, we'll be back after the break when we'll be taking a look at the week ahead and just what is likely to come out of the woodwork.